And you're just gonna stand there and cry? The subtext of all of this is that Luffy will fight for you, but only if you have the courage to also fight for yourself. Momo tells Luffy, I want to defeat Kaido, but I am too small, I cannot do it, so I want you to help me fight. And Luffy says, I get it now, let's team up. It's an alliance. So on one hand, it's pretty obvious that Luffy does not tolerate crybabies and cowards. I believe there was even a moment where Luffy straight up told Shirahoshi, I don't like you. But then people might look at Usopp and say, well, this doesn't make sense, which is why the depth here matters. Just because someone experiences fears does not mean that Luffy does not like them. Fear is ubiquitous, everyone experiences it. It's only when he has the impression that fears are dictating their actions that he loses respect. Luffy operates by the simple and pirate-like philosophy that if you want something badly enough, then take it, and prepare yourself for all that might entail. If you want something but don't try to get it, that makes you a weak person. As I regularly argue on this channel, all of this is derivative of Buddhism, the fact that the story of One Piece is a parable of Buddhism. Low-key, Luffy hates people like Shirahoshi more than he hates the actual villains in the story. Have you guys noticed that? I think that it makes more sense when you realize that Buddhists and Buddhism teaches that fear is the root cause of all suffering. Aggression is a suffering, but fear is the root cause of all of them. Fear is what prevents our souls from learning and growing. I think that you can legitimately argue that teaching somebody to obey their fears is a worse evil than any what we would call evil. So if you're curious as to why Luffy is so disappointed in Elbaf, right, this is why. Just the same with Momonosuke, I believe that Luffy has the impression that the giants are being ruled by their fears, which is a decidedly un-warrior-like attribute. There's also an incredible level of irony because Luffy is also the sun god Nika. Luffy is the god that the island of Elbaf worships. And even if that's not like technically true, I think that it's a very safe assumption that Luffy is the same as Joy Boy and the same as Nika from a personality standpoint, right? So he reflects their god. Think about that. Basically, their god has arrived on the island and is disappointed in what they have become. So I think that this chapter encourages us to think more about the dynamic. Luffy even says straight up in the chapter, this is a bit of a letdown, Usopp. And then Usopp is also trying to understand it. Yeah, but it's not like peaceful Elbaf is a bad thing. And I think that these are the very same questions that readers of One Piece will also be asking, whether out loud or subconsciously. Why is a peaceful Elbaf a bad thing? Why is raising these children with nothing but love and kindness potentially a bad thing? At the same time, you might ask yourself why Luffy was raised by Garp, and Garp threw Luffy into a hole in the forest and left him to figure it out. The joke of it aside, is Garp problematic or is he based? It's a pretty deep conversation. I really shouldn't talk about it at all. There's pros and cons in practically everything that we do. Adversity has this duality about it. Adversity is important in shaping successful human beings. Adversity can also destroy someone. The question is essentially, do we sacrifice greatness to protect the weak? I would guess in the eyes of a Buddhist, you live multiple lives, so you should not fear death for yourself or for anyone around you, including your own children. The life that you're living is merely a conduit to learning. So if you want to boil a parent's job down, it's to make your children strong and able. If fears get in the way of you performing this job, again, I would guess in the eyes of a Buddhist, you're simply encouraging suffering. So it's about balancing the risk and the reward, while overall trying to do the right thing. But yeah, based on what Oda has already drawn in Elbaf, the irony kind of slaps you in the face. The kids defiantly state in this chapter that they hate violence. King Harold wanted Elbaf to become a peaceful country, and this is how they've decided to take it. It makes you wonder whether Elbaf's war-loving culture itself at some point caused harm. This is also not an outrageous thing to believe because the first time that we were ever introduced to giants in the story was Dory and Brogy in the island of Little Garden, and they had been fighting for 100 straight years. And they had every intention for all 100 of those years to attempt to kill the other. I think that it's pretty easy to envision why this might have been a bad thing. So I began this video with a rant about the virtues of violence, right? But there's the other side of the coin. We know now that Elbaf was once known as Warland. Were the giants at war with themselves for hundreds of years, just like Dory and Brogy. So eventually enough was enough, King Harold stepped in and offered a new vision for the future. But I think that you can go too far in the opposite direction. Prince Loki very obviously subscribes to the old ways. Everything about him screams it. The crass language that the giant children abhor Loki uses it. Literally, the solution to every problem in Loki's estimation is violence. But astute readers will notice, right, that Loki is currently chained to a tree. Otherwise, he would be the king of Elbaf, and Elbaf would reflect him and his leadership. Do you think the giants peacefully asked Loki to chain himself to this tree? Probably not. How did he end up there? Violence. The fact that the giant children do not respect and appreciate this is a failure of education. It's not a coincidence that Oda is highlighting the education of Elbaf in these chapters, the Great Owl Library. Basically, every giant that we're being introduced to right now is a teacher. The irony is very much intentional. Learning is good. In some ways, their education is prospering, but in other more subtle ways, their education is lacking. I think that the reality is that based on what the adults in Elbaf are teaching the children, that in 50 or 100 years, however much time that it takes, Loki will eventually get free. Loki or somebody like him. Eventually it will happen. You can even take this to a macro, like world scale level. The island of Elbaf is surrounded by enemies, including the world government and all affiliated islands, or great pirates. Every single one of these powerful factions are a threat to Elbaf's autonomy. Like, something that we know is true in the story is that Elbaf has remained unconquered for 800 years, and they're kind of special in this way. How has Elbaf managed this? Well, it's because they were an island of the greatest warriors in the world. So I guess what I'm saying is that violence was the means by which Elbaf protected its own freedom. And this can be true at the same time as violence was the reason for great strife within Elbaf. The takeaway is that balance and good judgment matters. I think that you should neither love nor hate violence. It's an integral part of life, and it can be used for both good and for bad, and every shade in the middle. Someone brought this up to me on Twitter, and I'm going to share it because I think that it's incredibly true, but you realize once we're now in Elbaf, in retrospect, this is probably something Oda intended to delve into from the very beginning, like when he began writing One Piece. Literally, this is chapter 1 stuff. Luffy's flashback eating the Gomu Gomu no Mi with Shanks in his village and the bandits. If you recall, when the bandits arrived in the village, they insulted Shanks. They spilled booze on him. And in the strange moment that even Luffy didn't understand at the time, Shanks decided not to fight them. He said it's not a big deal, it's just some spilled booze. But then, when his friends were in danger, his demeanor completely changed. When his friends were in danger, Lucky Roo killed the threat. This is, in my opinion, the quintessential One Piece example of when sometimes violence is required and sometimes it is not, and how Shanks judges that. The theme of that singular chapter is now becoming a theme of an entire arc. And with this context being established, you can now go back and look at Dory and Rogi in Little Garden. Why were they fighting? Because they disagreed about which one captured the larger Sea King? Is this worth killing someone over? They even straight up said they no longer even remember why they were fighting. In retrospect, it's pretty clear that Oda was criticizing the culture of the giants. King Harold most likely had a point. But this does not mean that the solution is no violence at all. I kind of feel like I'm talking in circles. Not sure if I said this or not, but, you know, it is what it is. Just to reiterate about fear, I think that it's a reasonable speculation at this point in time that the giants of Elbaf, through King Harold, now fear what they were. This is why they have changed so drastically. And this is why Luffy is so bothered. So fittingly here, because Luffy is basically their god, he's going to arrive in their island and show them the way. And of course, Loki is going to help him do that. Just as a very minor prediction here, I'm curious if Oda goes all the way with this, but there's an opportunity here for Elbaf to be in danger. Loki and others could be a threat to everyone, and they turn to Luffy to save them. And Luffy says no, not until they have decided to fight for themselves. This is another element that is actually present in Luffy and Shanks' flashback. Shanks saved Luffy, yes, but only after Luffy proved that he was willing to fight for himself. He was simply overmatched. But honestly, Oda could take this in several, fascinating directions. There's potentially the opportunity for Luffy himself to learn and grow. I say that because the giants of Elbaf are already Luffy's friends, so they are his friends, so he should fight for them. That is what Shanks taught him. That is who Luffy is. But would Luffy fight for friends that aren't willing to fight for themselves? This contradiction could end up becoming story. When Luffy was a child, this is precisely what he did. In Luffy's eyes, Shanks was not willing to fight for himself. So Luffy decided to fight the bandits himself, for Shanks. There's also the intriguing element that the reason why Luffy was so bothered by Shanks' inaction is how much respect Luffy had for him. Oda has set up the story so the same is true of the giants of Elbaf. Luffy has very high expectations for them. This is what Luffy said to Shanks. "You think it's funny? He made you look like a weakling. Why didn't you fight him? Sure, they outnumbered you, and maybe they looked pretty tough, but what kind of man lets himself be treated like that then laughs about it? You're a disgrace to all pirates." And Shanks says, "When you grow up, maybe you'll understand, kid. Killing doesn't make you a name." Right now, many people are openly questioning just how evil Loki is. I want you to understand that it's possible that Loki is everything that he wants to appear to be. But there are enough little details, I think, to make a case for reasonable doubt. Like Mosa or Shaggy told him, "You're a lot kinder than you appear to be." This is speculative, but there are people out there that are actively questioning whether or not Loki actually killed his father. Another theme of this arc could end up being lies, which would be fitting considering Usopp. And this would also work incredibly well with Chapter 1. Loki metaphorically spills booze all over the giants of Elbaf. He makes them look weak. He humiliates them. But he might not have any intention of actually harming them. Meaning, just the same as Shanks and the bandits, there may not be any reason to fight him, at least initially. But just some food for thought, highly speculative. If this were to be the case though, then obviously someone else would need to be the villain of this arc, and that could very easily be Stabs or the Shanks clone. You could also get an incredibly direct parallel where Loki basically shits all over the giants of Elbaf, and that pisses off one of these giant kids like Colin, who still want to be warriors and respect the identity of Elbaf as an island of warriors. So this kid would be the same as child Luffy. He decides to take it upon himself to fight for the pride of Elbaf, attacks Loki, and then Luffy would have his reason to emulate Shanks. But yeah, one more thing on this before we move on, and pardon me if this sounds a bit preachy. If I'm gonna discuss it, damn it, I'm gonna discuss it. Confidence is crucial in life. When your every instinct is wrong, this does not foster confidence. This is also relevant to the story of One Piece. Said this sometime earlier, but Luffy is not particularly thoughtful. He operates based on intuition and instinct 99.9% of the time, and this has made him extremely confident. Why is Luffy doing all of these great things? Because he believes that he can, unconditionally, always. My opinion is that current society has a confidence problem. Should I say this? Should I do this? Is this right? Is this wrong? And I'm no different. Look at how careful I was to have this conversation. It's because I don't entirely trust my own instincts. I'm afraid of the consequences of expressing myself. I end up doing it anyway out of principle, because it's what I believe in and what I truly want to do. But many others are not the same. In some ways, they have a bit more sense than I do. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Being wrong is a part of life, and how many people, including myself, learn best. It honestly breaks my heart a little bit to see the giants in Elbaf, the kids, who still want to be warriors. I personally don't think that we have much control over what drives us, what inspires us. The surest way to break somebody is to convince them to hate who they are. A common quote that is thrown around is that you cannot love others until you love yourself. The story of One Piece is also about love. So I guess just be aware of the intrinsic human conditions that you've decided to demonize. Pros and cons. Pick your battle, so to speak. Personally, I wouldn't steal these children's joy. Encourage them to become the best versions of themselves. But individual judgment is obviously required. But yeah, I apologize for that. As that one guy on South Park would say, I lack a discipline. So we spent more time inside of the Owl Library, and we find out that the head librarian of the Owl Library is literally a 100-year-old giant owl. And it is explained to us that the reason why the books gigantify themselves when you enter the library is because of the owl. Lilith even speculates that the owl has a devil fruit. She says he must have eaten the rear fruit and become a nurturing owl. So yeah, my disappointment is immense, and my day is ruined. I so want there to be like magical elements of Elbaf. Magical in the, devil fruits are kind of normal, like magical in a unique way. So having a phenomenon explained by devil fruit is disappointing. Although many would say very predictable. My question is how Lilith would know that the owl consumed a devil fruit, or that devil fruit's name. It's an owl. I totally am aware that I am coping, but this is just a theory. Also, there's just the lingering question of why the owl decides to gigantify books and nothing else. I mean, that thing sure was quick to enlarge the book that Robin happened to be holding. Like, geez, dude, calm down. You better believe that I will continue to subscribe to the idea that everything in Elbaf is a lie until proven otherwise. Fully prepared to die on this hill. I'm also really liking the dynamic between Colin and Luffy, for some of the reasons that we previously discussed. But also, it's just really interesting that Colin is half human. Apparently, his father got with Ripley, Don't think too much about it. Don't think too much about it. Don't think too much about it. Yeah, I've thought too much about it. You've seriously got to be packing some heat to impregnate a giant. The word is fertile. But yeah, we're told that this dude used to be a pirate and that he didn't fear anyone, not even the warriors of Elbaf. The number of powerful characters who would not fear the giants of Elbaf, who were formerly used to be pirates and presumably are still alive, is pretty small. Especially someone who you could imagine having a relationship with Ripley that Ripley would love and respect. So let's do some quick maths. We were reminded in this chapter that giants can live to be 400 years old. I would guess that a 400-year-old giant would equate to a 100-year-old human, meaning it is a logical assumption that giants grow at 1/4 the rate of humans. Colon appears to me to be somewhere between the ages of 6 and 8. Multiply that by 4 and you get Colon's actual age, roughly somewhere between 24 and 32. So his father was a big shot pirate sometime in that time frame, and likely some years before. Everybody I see is speculating Scopper Gaban. That's what I think. One of the oldest lasting One Piece theories is that Luffy encounters a member of the Roger Pirates at crucial junctures in the story. We met Crocus at the beginning of the Grand Line, we met Rayleigh in the middle of the Grand Line, so then one more Roger Pirate remains at the end of the Grand Line, Scopper Gaban. This also ties seamlessly with the community prediction that the man in the strat that has already been foreshadowed in Elbaf is Scopper Gaban. This also works incredibly well because a lot of people, myself included, think that the man in the strat that we see in Elbaf is the same as the guy who visited Crocus in the cover story in Fishman Island. Scopper visiting an old friend makes a lot of sense. But yeah, honestly, I could throw out some other long shot predictions. It doesn't necessarily have to be Scopper, but I'm so convinced that, like, what's the point? If you were Oda, why wouldn't you choose Scopper? Only if he wanted to troll. So yeah, not gonna lie, I'm pretty excited about this, especially with the fake Shanks that has appeared in the arc. Just having another powerful ally like Scopper, it would just work. I also like the idea of an evolution of interactions between Luffy and the members of the Roger Pirates that he meets. Crocus is stationed at the beginning and he greets everybody who arrives in the Grand Line and sort of introduces them to the mystery or the romance of it. We learned from Whitebeard and Marineford that Roger was waiting for somebody. We know that this person is Joy Boy, right? But Whitebeard also specifically told us that Teach definitely was not this person. Basically, Roger was waiting for somebody of the D family. Because Teach was a D, Whitebeard had the thought at some point in the past that Blackbeard could have been that guy, until Marineford. So it's just like incredibly cool to me to think of Crocus as being like a secret Easter egg of the beginning of the Grand Line. It's kind of hard to find him. He's hiding within a whale. In a way, you kind of gotta adventure to discover that he is there. I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it makes it seem like a test. Joy Boy is gonna be a D, and he's gonna find Crocus in this whale, because naturally he would adventure his way in there some way, somehow. With Rayleigh, I kind of get the impression that he's waiting in the middle of the Grand Line to perhaps assist somebody who is a candidate, ensure that they are prepared for the next step. And I guess that makes me think that Scopper is some kind of final challenge. But anyway, concluding the introduction to the Owl Library, all of the Straw Hats end up going their separate ways. But Frankie in particular stood out to me. We've brought this up before, but the Thousand Sunny was literally made out of Adam's wood. So naturally, Frankie is curious about Treasure Tree Adam. But he tells us that Treasure Tree Adam is not the only Adam tree in existence. It's simply the oldest. So on one hand, I'm thinking, where are the other Adam trees? Are they just basically normal-sized trees? Little seedlings that are harvested for their wood? If this was the case, then why did they sell the bark in the black market? To me, this just sounds like a booming industry. So jumping down this thought rabbit hole, I guess it just led me to the conclusion that the world government might have outlawed the selling of Adam's wood. This material may only be for celestial dragon use. Then at the same time, I started to wonder if this is a thing that is just created but can't be sold overtly. What is the world government building with it? Is it being created specifically for the great bridges that we know that they are constructing? And on the other hand, this has me thinking about the theory that the mountains of Drum Island are not actually mountains. They are cut down and frozen great trees. In my opinion, there has to be a purpose in Oda sending Frankie to investigate the Adam tree. Inject the lore dump straight into my veins. We also get to see a little bit more about the Pentacle Castle intruders, the fake Shanks and his accomplice. Apparently the girl has some kind of bandage power. Obviously this is probably a devil fruit ability, but was I the only one who also thought that this seemed similar to Kumadori from CP9? His technique, Seime Kikan, where he could manipulate and control his hair. Essentially, the entire use case of this ability was using his hair so that he could bind his opponents. This just feels awfully similar to me, even if it's just a devil fruit. Especially because we're already kind of comparing this girl and the fake Shanks to members of Cypherpunk, but in their final form, at the highest level. But yeah, I guess my honest take right now is that I'm not fully hyped yet for Shanks and Friend quite yet. We now know that they are looking for Loki, so maybe they end up freeing him. But I'm curious to see exactly where this goes. But yeah, the Straw Hats and the Giants finally have their party, which is interesting that we began the arc with a party. I'm not sure, has that ever happened before? I don't think that it has. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but the only thing I would actually compare this to is Whiskey Peak, where the Straw Hats were tricked. I'm just saying. Well, maybe Zoe as well. So hold that thought. But yeah, you know, as Oda likes to do, we ended the chapter with a bit of mystery. The world's oldest giant, Mountain Beard Jarl, has finally made an appearance. And, well, he's been shanked in the head. There's literally a sword sticking through his skull, which is apparently a new thing. Oda drawing this at the same time that he's drawn Shanks and Elbaf, having himself a chuckle. Look guys, I'm not gonna do it this week. I'm gonna spare you and spare myself from the suffering every single week. Not gonna do it. I wanna argue that this is some like crazy unique thing about the island of Elbaf, you know, where you just get shanked in the head and it goes through your brain and everything's an illusion, right? Nothing is real. Not gonna do it. We've actually seen other characters that have similar features, like Shiki. Literally his head fused with a wheel. So I'm just gonna assume that there's really not that much mystery here. But if you desperately want a conspiracy theory to end this review, how hilarious would it be if we discovered that giants are like giant sized, right? But their brains are actually the same size as humans. Or smaller, so there's a lot of empty space. I mean, Oda has literally left Chopper in the Great Owl Library to learn about medicine and Elbaf. He's probably going to come across a book about giant physiology and anatomy. Watch this become a thing. But yeah, I think that's it for me today. Curious as to what you guys think, whether you noticed something from the chapter that I might have missed, just share your thoughts. If you're interested, check out my book, The Booms, in the description. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad, and as always guys, have a wonderful day.
Please. Please. Oh, yes, thank you. Did I forget? I see you are very to study such. Please. Great. Most time. You are a volcano. determine if you have. It seems torrent, whereas I'm there is, but I can take gathering place. Shall I let my share them with me? Your thoughts.
Will you joy accept? Rise with us. Interest now, you believe. The drawing room now. But be sure.
wish you luck. You have. I have no.